The EP Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at theeppodcast.com.
You know, it's easy to run a podcast network when there's so much to talk about. Sox in the Basement, the premier White Sox podcast right here on the Broadcast Basement On Demand Radio Network, covering a brand new White Sox manager. It's on demand anywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com as we talk about the hiring of Pedro Grifol. On Southside Pod, a weekly half-hour show that covers all of the Southside's happenings, we are covering a meet-a-thon on the most recent episode. You got to listen to understand that completely. And we're talking about all of the high school football matchups here in the postseason. But here on the EP podcast, we have head coach Jerry Verde. The Evergreen Park Mustangs win in a shutout victory. First round of the postseason in front of a raucous crowd, and they're on to round number 2. The game coming up this Saturday, and this is a Football Friday. The head coach joining us in just moments. It's all brought to you by the First National Bank of Evergreen Park. 2.5% statement savings special. That's the interest. Also, on an 11-month CD, you're getting 3%. 26 months, you're getting 3.25. The First National Bank of Evergreen Park invest in this community because they love this area as much as you do, and their Total Access checking account gives you free ATMs nationwide and a $300 bonus with qualifying activities. You have a great mobile banking tool, brand new, launched this summer, and award-winning customer service, and it's right here in the EP. This is the bank that I use, my family uses, my business uses, right in that iconic building at 95th and Pulaski. Stop in and see them today. $100 required to open up that account. Member FDIC. Evergreen Park Community High School's scholarship fundraiser is coming up on Sunday, November the 13th over at 115 Bourbon Street. $40 at the door, but you can get tickets in advance for $35. The folks that have organized that event will talk all about where that money goes, give out more details on the event coming up on the next episode of the EP podcast, so make sure you are subscribed. Whatever you're listening to the EP podcast on right now, even if you clicked on a link in Facebook, there is an option to subscribe through any app. If you're on the eppodcast.com, put in your email address. We'll send you a link each and every time. Meanwhile, this Saturday, November the 5th, before you go out and see the Evergreen Park Mustangs, you got to travel on the road for that game. Enjoy some light refreshments as you smash your pumpkins into bits. The annual Pumpkin Smash happening over at the Community Center, 3450 West 97th Street. Kids must be accompanied by an adult. It is presented by the EP Environmental Recycling Commission and the Rec Department. For more details, 708-229-3373. Coming up on November the 17th, it's a Thursday at 11 a.m. at the EP Community Center. Once again, 3450 West 97th Street. For $10, they got a roast chicken dinner. Musical entertainment by Johnny Gray, and the lunch is free to all Evergreen Park veterans. Please RSVP if you plan to attend. Tickets actually must be purchased by Monday the 14th. The head coach of the EP Mustangs, up next, right here on the EP Podcast. Building relationships, supporting the community, and service. These are the things that Country Financial stands for. They're more than just an office you may pass by as you drive through Evergreen Park. They're neighbors who lend a helping hand and support the fabric of your community, including charitable organizations, sports, financial education, and civic organizations. And since Country is already your neighbor, they want to get together and chat. Call your local Country Financial representative, Mike Thauer, today at 708-425-1559 to talk about the things that are important to you and how he can help you protect them. On the line with me right now, the head coach of a team that just won a home football playoff game right here in Evergreen Park this past weekend, head coach of the Evergreen Park Mustangs, Jerry Verde. How are you, Coach?
Doing well. We're coaching football in November. That's always good.
Exactly. That's awesome that you're coaching football in November. And, I know you don't like to pat yourself on the back, but it looks like you did a pretty good job this past Friday. A lopsided victory in round one over Comer, 48-0. You blanked them. Tell me about this game.
Well, we had a good week of practice. I mean, our players committed. We brought up about 12 deserving sophomores, a couple freshmen, and we really did. We had a pretty good week of practice. We executed very well, that night, and defensively we excelled. We held them to under 50 yards total offense once you subtract the negative yardage plays. And we had 3 interceptions and we had 3 fumble recoveries. And so we gave the offense some pretty good field position, and they were able to take advantage. And by the time we got into after the first series in the third quarter, the clock was running. We were winning by 40 points. So it was a good night. Everybody got to play, and it was a home game, and everybody enjoyed it.
Tell me a little bit about that atmosphere. What did it feel like out there? Was it just delirious excitement?
Well, it's enjoyable. You try to keep things in perspective. As exciting as playoff football is, it's round one, and you're going to be playing more football, after that game is over. So you kind of try to keep things grounded, I guess would be the word that I would use. But some of the best parts of the night maybe weren't even the good plays made by some of our guys that always make big plays. For instance, Jed Ajay had a really good night, about 135 yards rushing. He had 3 touchdowns, and he had a long touchdown run, and he's very hard to tackle. He had a great night, and obviously we were excited for the way he played. But we were just as excited in the fourth quarter when our backup quarterback, Aiden Bench, scored his first touchdown of the season. I mean, there might even been a bigger roar for that because, you've got expectations for what Jed's going to do. And then, Aiden gets his chance to finally score this year. And it was exciting. It's fun for everybody. You just got to keep it grounded and realize that there's more football to play later.
Oh, trust me, Coach. I was asking that question about the crowd and the fans. I know you're not going to get deliriously excited. You're even keel. I get that. So you talked about the defense, holding this team down. Anybody stand out on defense? Is that where your player of the game is coming from?
It's really hard to pick one player this particular time around. Because so many guys had big plays. Our free safety, Max Manso, had a big fumble recovery. Asiel Rubalcaba had a big interception, and he had a 20-yard return. Axel Rubalcaba, his cousin, had a big fumble recovery. He returned into the red zone, set up a touchdown. As usual, our middle linebacker, Caleb Kolovitz, he had a sack, had a pass breakup tackle for loss. He ended up finishing the game with 8 tackles. And, Steady Eddie Eduardo Antunes had a big tackle for loss in a key situation and ended up with 8 tackles also. So it's hard to pick a single player of the game when you've got, a performance like that all the way around. It really is.
All right, so I'm looking at this 4A bracket. There were some upsets. Just because you guys were the higher seed, a 6 seed versus an 11, it was not a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination. I'm flipping along here. I saw a 15 seed beat a 2 in your own bracket. I see that a 10 beat a 7 on the other side of the bracket, and I want to say there was another big upset that also occurred as I'm scanning through this thing. It's not a guarantee that the higher seed is going to walk away with the game. Is that something you try to explain to the kids when you're going through this thing? Because it's very easy to sit there and say, well, somebody said this team is so much higher than the other team. We're clearly the underdog.
Well, it gets a little complicated from the standpoint of, you look at the seeding and you always expect, well, that must just be the better team. But you also have to take into account that it's just very based on mathematics. I mean, a 9-0 team is going to end up being a top seed, and then how many wins did their opponents have, kind of puts them in with the other 9-0. So if a 9-0 had played a very difficult schedule, and their 9 opponents had a combined 40 wins, they're a higher seed than, let's say, a 9-0 team whose opponents had like 30 combined wins. And that happens across the board. Obviously, teams play, some teams play more difficult schedules than others. Oftentimes people refer to the Chicago Catholic League, someone who's 5-4 coming out of that, playing someone from another league that maybe isn't as competitive, that might be an 8-1, 9-0. The record isn't always indicative as far as who the better team is. And that happens quite a bit. Back in 2018, we squeaked into the playoffs at 5-4. We were, in our side of the bracket, we were the 16 team, and we played a 9-0 Peyton Prep, and we won that game. We obviously had a more difficult schedule than they did, and we ended up being the better team that night. So that happens quite a bit, and there are complaints about the way the playoff system works. But it's the best system they can come up with now, unless you get a group of people together that can actually rate the teams, kind of like what they do for college football. And that's just way too much of a subjective process where too many opinions get involved, and then it just would be too difficult. That's why they keep it just with basic numbers and basic math.
So I'm looking at your opponent next week, St. Francis. They have beat up on a lot of people this year. Like if you just look at their schedule, you don't know how strong it is. You would say this team is incredible because they have one win where they scored over 80 points and they blanked the other team. Okay, now I don't know how good Bishop McNamara is down in Kankakee, but they whooped up on them. They were 9-1 as their overall record, 4-0 in their conference. They play teams as far south as Champaign. They beat up on Marengo in their first round game, 63-0. So you have another team that blanked their first round team running into you. It's a 3 seed versus you guys a 6 seed. They're 9-1 at this point. You're 8-2. Tell me about this matchup.
Well, they're a very good team, obviously, and their record, tells you such, and just as the scores do, and they do a lot of things well. They've got a very good quarterback. They've got good running backs. They've got a nice, a good offensive line, defensive line, and they're very well coached, and they're a program that's been up for the last decade, maybe even more than that. They won the 2008 state championship, so they also have a bit of a storied history too, to them. And they're good at what they do. We appreciate that. We respect that. We believe that our matchup with them, that we can be competitive with them. We're preparing for that, and we feel good about ourselves right now too. We're on the upswing. We've had 4 straight weeks of really, really good football for us, where we've gotten better and we've grown as a team, grown as an offense, grown as a defense, and we really do believe that Saturday afternoon it's going to be one heck of a game, and we are definitely looking forward to it.
You try to stay very even keel when you talk about your team, but you're right. Over the last couple of weeks, you can see everything starting to click on all cylinders. Evergreen Park is no slouch at 8-2 at this point after winning their first round playoff game. And I'm not going to look ahead at the bracket in any way, and I know you look game to game, but this is the kind of game that it feels like to me as just somebody on the outside looking in. Like if EP beats a 9-1 team, they knock the 3 seed out. They're the 6. They've won 2 games in this thing. It's a statement type game that everybody else is going to start paying attention to. There's going to be more write-ups on, hey, look out for the Mustangs now, because here they are. They've won 2 playoff games and they're fierce and they're a tough team, and look at that record. Is this the kind of game that could be a program defining game if you can go out there and take care of business?
Yeah, it's a huge game. It's maybe the biggest game that we've played here, in my 7-year time, because we made the quarterfinals in 2018, and we ran into a Montini team that was very, very, very good. And we might not have been in 2018 at the level we are right now, to be completely honest. So, it is a statement game. Not to give you too much coach speak, but obviously every game in the playoffs is a statement game. But yeah, this is definitely a huge game for us because we're playing a very, very good opponent that we believe that we're going to compete against. And if we can come out on top, that makes a huge statement.
In Wheaton at St. Francis, right?
Right, and they've got a really interesting field. They got the blue turf to match their kind of powder blue uniforms, and it's pretty neat. It's neat to see on film, and I know we're going to get a kick out of it when we see it in person.
That's got to be hard. Like, when you have a uniform that matches the blue turf, would that throw off a player who's not used to it? Do you worry about that at all?
I don't know. I mean, back in the days, everyone used to complain about Mount Carmel and Joliet Catholic. For those who don't know, they wear brown uniforms, and everyone used to say, well, they wear their home brown uniforms and it hides the football. And, well, it really doesn't. But, from a standpoint of, thinking that it gives an advantage, maybe kind of sort of out of your peripheral, maybe they kind of blend into the field, possibly. But I don't know. If anything, it's just got to probably have a shock value for the other team. If you come in there and you're dwelling on the color of the turf, then you're probably not thinking about the things you're supposed to think about in order to play a football game.
Saturday afternoon game. The Mustangs go on the road to Wheaton. 8-2 Mustangs versus 9-1 St. Francis. And Coach, good luck in this round. We're all pulling for you, and hopefully we can keep this train rolling.
Hey, we appreciate it.
Another show is wrapped up. Another show's in the books. Another show is wrapped up. And then by the looks, it's going to be a good one. And we'll see you next week. And the nude is basement. And the nude is basement. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. And it's in the books. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. And by the looks, it's gonna be a good one. Nudie's Basement. Broadcast Basement. The Nudie's Basement. The Broad Basement. Slancha.
The EP Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at the eppodcast.com.